Hey there, everybody. I just want to say, before I get started this week, how incredibly encouraged I am by so many of you who have given such amazing feedback to this podcast. I really started this thinking, I don't care if anyone listens or not. That's not what this is about. This is about me talking, which is something I like to do. And it gave me an outlet that I was looking for. So thank you. Thanks for listening. You certainly don't have to. I don't listen to a lot of my friends' podcasts, certainly not every week, which, speaking of, this is going to be something I do every 2 weeks. I think every week is too much right now as I'm getting started. It's going to be every 2 weeks. And this week's episode is going to be really interesting because I interviewed one of my oldest friends from high school who I've recently gotten reconnected with. His name's Kyle Hudson. Kyle and I started a company together very recently, and we spent some time together rehashing some things about growing up, about being in different social spheres, about parenting. And one really fascinating thing about Kyle is his family. He has a family situation, a dynamic that is unlike anyone I've ever experienced. So it's a really good conversation. I hope you enjoy it. Oh, and of course, let me mention my amazing future sponsor. One day, I really hope that sponsors this podcast. So until they do, I'm just going to keep mentioning and we'll see what happens. Let's get this started. What is the video that you remember the most that we made in high school when our parents would leave us alone while they went out and did fun things together?
One of us, maybe me, was wearing a wrestling singlet.
It was definitely you.
It was definitely me. Okay. And it had to also do with one of us was on my roof and like jumped off the roof to chase the other one. One was like a bad guy and one was like the hero. I don't know if the wrestling guy was the hero, but maybe I jumped off of. Now the roof was a lower sort of 10 feet off the ground or whatever, but it still was like you're jumping off the roof.
Everyone listening is imagining you jumping off the roof of a house
in a wrestling singlet.
It probably was dangerous. It was at least a dangerous height, but there was so much camera courage in high school.
Yes.
Not just physically, but
I don't think it was break your leg high, but it was like you still shouldn't. Parents would say you shouldn't jump off.
Kids now are so used to seeing people on YouTube do stunts, pranks, but in high school we were the lone guys doing this kind of thing.
Yes.
Only for ourselves. There was no following, no growth metrics. It was just let's go do something stupid, film ourselves, and then we'd come back and watch it.
Right. And the watch count for those videos was like 6.
6.
You know.
And maybe 5 of them were us.
Maybe 10, yeah.
The one I remember is there was some sort of spoof of like a medicine commercial, and you had like these different medicines on a table. One of them was an orange. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
What in the world?
I don't know.
Oh, and the toothbrush.
That's what I kept thinking.
That's the one.
Fork or spoon. Yeah, there was a toothbrush.
Did we copy that from something?
No.
The State?
Yeah.
Do you remember The State?
I do remember The State. It was sort of Kids in the Hall-esque, and I would say that like our voices or the voice inflections we would do was sort of like The State. I don't remember how to do it now. I wish I could. But
Michael Ian Black has continued to be one of my favorite sketch comedians. My dream is to have him on this podcast. Michael Ian, if you're ever interested,
call
and
him.
Like just having so much smoke blowing up your ass, I would love to have you on this podcast. I do think he lives in Georgia now. I think he lives in Savannah.
A lot of people live in.
You don't understand. When we were kids, we just recreated your sketches as best we could.
Yeah.
By ourselves, only to be rewatched by ourselves.
Yes.
That is what we did.
I would say that in Living Color and The State, Kids in the Hall, that handful, and there weren't, what was cool about it too was there wasn't like 10,000 of these groups doing it. Like on YouTube now.
And there was SNL, but I didn't watch SNL.
No.
Why? Why didn't we watch that?
I would say that there were individual skits that really
because we were in bed.
Stood out. Yeah, totally. And there was no sort of watch it tomorrow on YouTube kind of thing or whatever. But
My
yes.
older cousins would get together at Thanksgiving and they'd be doing the like chopping broccoli and all these things. I didn't know what they were talking about.
Chopping broccoli.
I didn't know who Dana Carvey was until I saw Wayne's World.
Yeah.
But the reason I wanted to have you on the podcast was not just to rehash all of these stupid things that we did on camera, but because we've had a very interesting trajectory as friends.
I was doing the math just a minute ago. I think we're right at coming on 30 years.
30 years.
Yeah. It was so sophomore in high school, which for me would have been, well, for us would have been 94.
No, it was before that, right?
Well, maybe freshman, but so 30, 31 years. But I think it's right around there.
And we were mostly friends because our parents were friends. I mean, we went to the same youth group.
Yeah.
Which is really why any of my friends were my friends.
Right.
But we grew closer than a lot of my friends in youth group because our parents, like they were.
We did
They
New
weren't like
Year's and
swinging
we
with
did
everything, but they were like
yeah.
they did everything together.
They did everything. So ski trips and New Year's and Thanksgiving and we do Christmas things.
Yeah,
and,
which meant we just got left alone a lot.
yeah.
With
to
our
go
younger siblings,
make
yeah.
movies and play Nintendo and whatever. Like
That was the life.
yeah, it was.
We had a great situation there in
Yeah.
our high school years. When you think back to being a freshman or sophomore in high school and being pretty much the one guy
yeah.
in youth group that didn't go to our school.
Right.
Because when I think about the group of us,
Yep.
it was a bunch of guys that I was at school with every day.
Yep.
Was that hard? Did you feel like an outsider at times?
No, it actually helped because on the flip side of the coin, I've always been more introverted, and I would say a common thread from my relationships is punctuated. I've never really had like the group, like we all watch UGA football,
Right.
or we're all into like, going to concerts together, whatever it is. It's always very specific, like
Isolated relationships?
and that I feel very, this is just sound woo woo, but like I'm hyper aware of energy and not vibrations, but I don't know, that sounds
Like
very,
you just pick up on
I have
vibe.
so many like radio waves, frequencies.
I love how you just caught yourself saying vibrations. You're like, well, that's too woo woo. Let's not go
no,
there.
No, totally. Because
But you meant it.
No, but right when you say it, you all of a sudden you imagine stones and like special water and
Right.
stuff like that.
No, I
but
feel you.
But that's the thing is that like I've always been very, very in tune with sort of it feels like a hyper empath sort of. I pick up on intentions and vibrations and things
So
like that.
groups were hard for you?
Oh yeah. I could go I had to like teach myself to be an extrovert.
Because
like,
I would have killed me to be in your position.
yeah, it was
If
different.
I
but-
showed up, and I'm actually going to bring up something. I've never brought this up with you.
Yeah.
I'm using this as a way to unload my guilt.
that sounds good.
There's this video, maybe I can dig it up and show it, that we made on one of the youth group trips. It was like a highlight video. And of course, that was my job. I would go back from the live it up.
Been
Panama
doing
City
this since
beach.
he was 2.
Yeah. My cameras have only gotten worse.
Yeah.
But that was my job. And we made this video, and there was this opening scene to the video.
Yeah.
It's so embarrassing to think about. But me and Brian and Thomas and Chris, we had planned out this, what we thought was just this epic stunt. Because the week before we had been on a trip together that Thomas's parents took us on. So we had, on the drive back, we conjured up this brilliant stunt where we were going to show up at this youth group retreat. No one was going to believe that we were going to do this.
Yeah.
We were going to put on dress shirts. And the minute we pulled up to the hotel or the retreat center or whatever, we were going to run into the ocean wearing dress shirts.
Yeah. I remember this.
And we thought, we are the most badass. These guys are crazy.
Early Lonely Island.
But I've seen that video
Yeah.
since, and I notice you're in the video,
Right.
watching us do it.
Right.
And I would be lying if I didn't say, as an adult,
Yeah.
what that sucks. Like, because you were one of my best friends. You just didn't happen to be on the trip before with the
Right.
guys that I go to school with. And I just always wonder, I've carried this shame. Like, did you feel left out in that moment, if you remember it?
I've always been that way.
The guy on the side watching the group do the thing?
It's always, yeah, it's the same with what I was going to say earlier about sort of you guys going to a different school and sort of having a more tight knit, and by tight knit I mean like daily interaction. So you're going to have more inside jokes. You're going to have more like, oh, that thing yesterday or whatever. I had the same but opposite thing at my school, where it's like I had a small group, but I didn't really fit in. It was one of the things that, like, I wrestled, but I did it 1 year and I hated it. I played football 1 year.
You did get a use out of the singlet, though.
I did get one use out of the singlet. Yeah. I played basketball like once. You know, I did football once just to say I could do it, but it wasn't one of those that. So I wasn't hanging out with all the basketball people. I wasn't hanging out with all the football people, and it was the same that I had a handful of people with the right vibrations that I think also appreciated my sort of different point of view in terms of whether it was a little more sort of chill, empathetic, funny, whatever.
Yeah.
That they were like, yeah, come on in. This is,
Okay.
it's cool. But you're not like in the group.
In the group. Because first, a couple things. One is, I want you to, in a second, I want you to tell me what you mean when you say vibrations.
Yeah,
I'm not just
yeah.
going to let you get away with that.
Yeah.
Because
totally.
I think I know, but I know people listening are like, whoa, they didn't hear anything you said after that. Because this guy just said vibrations.
Vibrations.
But before you do that, I want to say that is how I felt also at school.
Right.
At this giant public high school.
Yeah, yours was
I was
massive.
not a football player.
Yeah.
I was not. I didn't even do like the scholastic, the student government type. I didn't do any of that. But youth group
Yeah.
is the place that I got to go feel like the in crowd. It was where I was so youth group cool.
It was specific and safe, and it was all with a sort of common purpose, and you knew that everybody's intentions were pretty good. I will say, however, I have to give an asterisk to your assessment from the outside.
Okay.
Tripp, as a person in high school, that was a very specific character. People knew, like, that was like, even in a big school like that, if I knew people that I said, oh, I mentioned that school, and I said, oh, do you know? And they'd be like, oh, yeah, I know him. I know of him.
That's because you just happen to be asking the other dorks.
No.
That's what.
No, but yours was, but so specific, just in terms of like video and comedy and funny, and like, it was very specific.
I'm glad you had that impression, but
yeah.
the truth is, I was not in the in crowd.
Yeah.
In my grade, but I will give you that I didn't have any enemies. So like, you could have asked the quarterback, do you know Tripp? And they would go, they'd think about it. Oh yeah, that guy. I like that guy.
Yeah.
But he wasn't going to talk to me. He just knew that like he had nothing to not like.
Right.
Because I may have made him laugh in class at some point.
Right. Yeah.
I'll remember this feeling I had this one day in class where I made this guy there's a few football players in my class who I felt so intimidated by. And if they would listen, they'd probably laugh. But it's high school. Like, there's a social hierarchy.
Yeah.
And they were in my class, and this was I think it was a literary language arts class or something. And for whatever reason, I found my groove as the class comedian.
Yeah.
And anytime I blurted something out that got a laugh, it was like this jolt of like, I'm actually okay.
Right.
I'm a likable guy. I have something to offer this world. I can't run as fast as these guys.
Yeah.
I couldn't even name the positions of a football team, but like, I found my worth. And that just kept escalating to the point where I was the the lack of respect I had for this teacher was off the charts. And I think she was like a fill-in. I think our original teacher was pregnant, so she left, and we had this new lady come in just trying to like, just make some order out of chaos. Right. And this was when universal TV remotes first came out.
Yeah, nice.
So I'm going to tell a story here, and I won't be so long-winded. But one day, I brought the little manual that came with it. I looked up the model of the TV in the corner of the room. I put the remote in my sleeve.
Yeah.
And did one of these. And every time the teacher turned around, I would turn the TV on. Okay. And she was getting so mad, like right out of the gate, very mad, because she already felt disrespected, but she didn't know who it was.
Right.
Football players do. And eventually everyone knew.
Yeah.
So it started as me just turning the TV off, her be like, walking over, turning the TV on or off after I turned it on. And eventually she was like, whatever, I'm just going to leave this on. I don't know what's going on. She thought she had me or whoever it was. And I thought, what am I going to do? So I started changing the channels. And it was like fuzz, fuzz, fuzz. And so it was hard for anyone to notice. And then I thought, oh, volume. And so then I just started, I held the button down. It's just the loudest that the TV could pump out fuzz it was. And now she's back to being frustrated. And she's looking at us going, if someone's doing this, you're in big trouble. We're all like, what?
Yeah.
So then she's smart. She goes, oh. And she goes over to her desk and she figures someone stole the remote. She opens a drawer. There it is. The remote. So now she's extra confused.
Yeah.
So she uses the remote. She turns it off. But she does something. I don't remember what happened, but she did something that instead of turning it off, it like changed it to a feed that actually was coming through.
Right.
Anyway, this kept going on to the point where she eventually went to the class next door. There's always two classes that had an adjoining door.
Never thought about the power cord.
Yes, right. All she had to do was unplug it.
Yeah.
So she went next door.
Yeah.
And I saw her lean in and say, "Hey, is you guys' TV doing something weird?"
Yeah.
Teacher's like, "No." And anyway, I think the whole class was like the whole hour was ruined.
Yeah.
That was living large
and just
the next
vibrating.
Day, the next day she comes in and she says, "Oh, by the way, guys, I talked to the administrators, and there were some men doing work on the roof yesterday."
Oh, that's what
was
going
on. The men on the men on the roof are
exactly
screwing with our volume. Anyway,
that's great.
That for me was how I felt significant, along with being popular in youth group.
It's interesting because you found a thing in high school that gave you that. Whether you knew it at the time or not, very specifically, you found a thing. I will say that your thing was a little more universal. I found a thing, but it was computers.
Oh, yeah.
But at the time, that was so specific. Being able to like hack into the library computer.
Right.
No one was going to be standing around applauding for the, you know what I mean? Like, now I did figure out how to sort of send a message that said like, "Oh, hi everyone," to like every computer.
Did you?
Yeah. And all the teachers got like, "Oh my gosh, who is in the system?"
Way preceding email.
Yeah, way preceding email. And actually also had found a copy of Doom on the library computer and was able to play Doom like during
Doom on the school library
I don't
computer.
know. Somebody,
if it wasn't you.
It wasn't me, but somebody figured it out. But that was so specific, but I knew it. I knew that was a thing. And what was funny is I'd started just messing with computers younger, and then when I got to high school, I remember not feeling like I knew my thing because it definitely wasn't sports. It wasn't academics because the way that I learn is whatever the opposite of a class is. I just can't. I'm not going to sit and listen and then sort of regurgitate it back. I have to do something. I have to break a computer. I have to take it apart.
Isn't that wild? Because you are like practically a savant at learning. Like you know so much more in so many categories than other people. Yet the place that you were supposed to go to do that was the hardest place for you to learn. The system
that's based on component learning and structure and and frameworks of how you should learn. Mine's the opposite. I just don't have fear of like someone saying, "Oh, look how terrible you did that." I think it's more that Edison sort of like, "Oh, well, 1,100 failures.
I'm just gonna let you get away with comparing yourself to Thomas Edison.
Yeah. No. I definitely am exactly like Thomas Edison. No, but I think, I tried and failed at a bunch of different stuff, but I never did anything formal with computers. I just tinkered with them, and then I remember sophomore year of high school, my typing teacher said, "We future business leaders of America." We're going to the state competition, and no one has signed up to take the computer information processing concepts test. That was a mouthful. No one has signed up.
No one signed up for
that. I was like, well, I'll do it. And she was like, okay. And she gave me a packet of like concepts to sort of study about a day or so before the competition. And I ended up getting like third or fourth in the state.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was one of those moments when I went like, oh,
so you knew you had a knack
there's something
for something
there. Yeah.
Yeah. And it wasn't just computers. Like, you were creative and funny. That's why we did those videos together. You've always been a comedian.
The comedy is another one that I've always enjoyed, but it's been specific. I never found a great outlet for it. I did improv classes in LA at Groundlings, and then in New York at not Second City. What am I thinking of?
Did you do Upright Citizens?
Upright, yeah, UCB. But I never really like.
Well, here's the thing. There's not many outlets for comedy.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, it's not like you realize, oh, I'm good with spreadsheets.
Yeah.
Now there's like 100 career paths.
Totally.
I have a knack for comedy, so I either figure out how to be famous in 2005.
Yeah.
Long
way around of saying, I think going back to high school, I think it was interesting that you found something that you found was universal, that you feel like you found a handhold to sort of feel like you could start to fit in. I felt like I found a handhold of something that was interesting, but it definitely did not help me fit in at all. So I feel like I still
that sucks.
I still feel like I still feel the same way now that I did back in high school, which is like I'm finding all these things that I can be good at. However, I would say they're not typically universal in a like when you chat with group or you go to a party and you talk about stuff that they're like, oh man, you're so good at those things. Come be my friend. You know what I mean?
Dude, like, tell me more about JSON.
Yeah, I know.
I could talk about.
Tell me how you format your REST API. Yeah, no one.
Well, the thing is, there are those groups, but you also don't really fit in there.
It's not really so. Anyways, it is interesting, and I will say that it has brought up lately so I've got two boys, and my oldest is cut exactly from the same cloth as me. And I will say that it has, thinking about this, not only in this conversation, but really thinking about this over the past couple of years as my oldest has been growing, has made me think I want to get really good at being able to describe what all of these moments were in my life of when I found things that could be interesting that I could be good at, and then juxtaposing that from needing to have those things prove to whatever group I was in a worth or a like, or that I have to find my group in high school or whatever. So that also sort of comes back to the whole why I don't really have groups, I have people. So you and I connect over new and interesting technology and where things are headed, and also comedy, and also just figuring out who we are and how to sort of feel better at that, and how to be incrementally.
And I would say like spiritually.
So, but that is how you and I connect. That is
it's a lot of ways
how I like connecting with people.
Right.
But we're not going to have a group of friends that all like figuring out new emerging technology and spirituality and incrementally being better people and comedy.
I think you're less unique than you're giving yourself credit for. I will admit, in the 90s, in high school, finding out that your passion was computers wasn't the fast track to climbing the social hierarchy. Okay.
Yeah.
But in 2024, if you're a grown man and you're middle age, you've got kids, chances are you're having a hard time finding a group.
I would also say that
rare.
things
unless you're just. Sometimes I envy people who are just more conventional all the way around. Like they're just interested in like the broad things. Football.
I have my hobby.
What kind of grill do you have?
Yeah.
And like, being angry about whatever's going on politically in the world. If that's your areas of interest and you can just live on those topics, then yeah, their world is sort of your oyster in the suburbs.
Right.
Like you can just go to any barbecue in the neighborhood and have a great time.
Right.
But if you have specialized interests, or if you're interested in more below the surface topics or spirituality,
Yep.
like good luck finding a group.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Or if you do find a group, you're typically going to be sort of scratching that itch for that one thing, that one topic area, and not sort of a broad set of interests. So yeah, I would say I'm much more sort of back to vibrations, sort of watching.
Let's talk about vibrations. What do you mean when you say that?
I think I read people's intent fairly well, and because like, I don't know, we get into the slew of anxiety and ADHD and an overactive brain and a strong empath, all these sort of things. Yeah. Like, I think what that does is typically you're sort of trying to read the room, and you're reading everybody's mannerisms, intentions, and you're trying to also figure out, and maybe this came from like, not to get back to like, middle school bullying and things like that. You're highly aware of people's intentions. And when you see someone coming around the corner, you see someone in a group that sort of makes that mental shift of, oh, I got something funny I can do to this guy.
It's actually like, very textbook that when you experience any sort of trauma or just like negative situations in those formative years,
right,
your brain is like, okay,
we're
not going to let that happen again.
No.
We're going to be on high alert all the time.
Yeah.
And so people with trauma tend to have like a hyper awareness of other people's emotions, and they're constantly evaluating their intent, and it feels like a very deep intuition. The problem is, though you are super aware and you almost have like a magical power, it's almost like a spider sense about people.
Right.
The problem is when you're wrong, you don't know it. People who are highly intuitive, and I would put myself in the category, Hannah's that way, 95% of the time can read people way faster than everyone else. But there's 5% of the time that your intuition's wrong, and you might think this person doesn't like me, this person's a threat, I don't fit in here.
Yeah.
And we're all thinking like, we love this guy.
Yeah. No, totally. I would say the anxiety and the overactive brain is okay with the 95%.
You're right.
That's an A+.
It might be. I might have been being nice. It might be more of a percentage of the time.
Could be.
Like what I saw that video of you watching us be so cool. My thought was, this makes me sad, because in this video, at least from a video from the camera's perspective, you were an outsider. You weren't getting to participate. And regardless of how that made you feel, all four of us would have been like, Kyle's awesome. We love Kyle. Like had we thought about it, we would have brought you a dress shirt.
Right.
We're just stupid.
I think what's interesting though is I wouldn't change it. And it goes back to thinking about trying to help my son, especially my oldest son, navigate the world. I wouldn't try and teach him how to fit into that group and to overextend himself to try and, what I would say is, as soon as humanly possible, understand being the kid on the beach, watching everybody do it. If you can learn how to do that and be okay sort of in different scenarios.
Appreciate that you are the observer.
Right. And the sort of values that come with that, and then you more quickly get to appreciating yourself versus constantly thinking, what is it about me that doesn't sort of fit into that group or this group or that group?
Maybe even be the only person on the beach who realizes how stupid what they're doing actually is. Maybe have a higher level perspective because you're the observer and not so caught up in doing whatever it takes to feel cool.
Or just apathy and shrugging and going, cool, they did that thing. all right, what's next?
Right.
And like getting away from that, like I have to sort of solve every scenario and try and like figure out how I fit in this scenario and that scenario and this scenario, but being more comfortable just sitting and being and sort of flowing with how things go.
You've always had a very unique perspective. I think just outside of your social, I think about like your family. I mean, I don't know how much you want to share about that, but do you feel that way?
Yeah, it's different. It's one of those that, I had growing up. It was really that I can remember. It was just me and my mom, but that's because my mom's first husband, they got divorced when I was only a couple of years old. So then it was just really me and my mom. Those memories are really vivid. It was like I had the master bedroom. She took the guest bedroom, which is crazy. I remember like driving. We would drive to preschool or wherever it was, and I would just be belting out Kenny Rogers, the Gambler, like in the car. Like it was very specific.
Why didn't you fit in, man?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I remember having an Atari 2600 and playing Pac-Man and then this older guy would come over, and it was what turned into my stepdad would come over, and we would play like Tank on Atari together, and like we planted
Hugh?
This was Hugh, and we planted a peach tree together and things like that. And then we moved into his house, and then most all of my formative memories were with him, and
Because they got married.
and yeah, because they got married, and then him and beyond were sort of all my formative sort of memories.
He was like more the dad figure in your
He
life.
was. And then Monty, who was my mom's first husband, I would see him every 2 weeks. We would go on like family vacations together. Like he and I would go see his family in Alabama, and I would go stay over at his house every other week for like a couple of days. And we had our own sort of little rhythm in terms of he introduced me to both classical music and like hard rock, like Guns N' Roses and Metallica and everywhere in between. So I think I got my like appreciation for music from him in a wide genre, not like get into the hard rock culture and that's your thing, but also appreciating classical, which sort of gave me a bit of that.
For adolescence, especially in our years. Like you were a country guy, a rock, like you found your identity in what your genre was.
Yeah.
Mine was contemporary Christian, but there was a twist.
There was a twist. It was my stepdad was actually my dad, and that my mom's first husband was not.
And I know you can talk about that, so like it's just so normal to you, but
Right.
as your friend in high school, thinking back, going, wait,
No, everything
Hugh,
was status quo.
right? Because you called Hugh,
No,
and
I
Monty Dad.
I called him dad.
Oh, you did?
I called him both dad. I never used step. That
But
always,
as far
to
as
me,
we knew, that was your stepdad.
if I had to explain to someone, I would say stepdad, and then it sort of solved everything. But I never called him stepdad to his face.
But you didn't
because-
know
No, I didn't.
that he
I
was your
didn't.
actual dad.
I didn't know until I actually. When was it? I was in my 30s. I saw a photo of him in the 60s or in the late 50s, whenever. He was in his teens and he was leaning against a tree with a white t-shirt. It was a very 60s sort of photo, but he had a crew cut, and it was me. Like that was me in the 60s. Like I got transported back in the 60s, and I went like, what? I was like, wait a second.
But
So then
did
I
you
started-
suspect that leading up to this point? Did you ever wonder, like, is this my actual dad? Or was that the first time you really
I
thought?
never wondered about him, but I did wonder about my original dad, as we'll call him, that he and I were so different that it just never really you never think about it as a kid, but when you're older, you sort of think we don't really have anything in common.
So
or interests.
your dad raised you
Yeah, totally.
while you thought
Yes.
your dad didn't. You thought there's this other guy that's like kind of pops in and out of my life. That's my dad. But then this other guy, thank the Lord, this other guy has stepped into my life and playing a dad role. But really, he was your dad.
Yeah, totally. But see, all through high school and college and stuff like that was just that was how it was. And we never, like, there wasn't any question about it. And you just thought, like, I have a stepdad and I have a dad, and like I hang out with the dad every now and then, but they're divorced. So like I only see him every now and then.
Which is perfectly normal. Like so
Totally.
many people have that sort of thing with their
Right.
dad and their stepdad. It's just that they usually know
Totally.
which one
I'm
is
actually
which.
glad I found out later in my 20s and 30s.
Why is that?
Like, I think I was more mature to handle, not
Yeah.
like if I found out at 17 or
You would have just
whatever.
been mad.
Well, and the hard thing is that my original dad, we'll call him, was he was very insulated, didn't have a lot of friends. He was very he had a very sort of small focus on life, and it was really just me. Like I was like a core part of that. And so I would have felt terrible had I been more immature and I'd have been like, oh, you're not even my, or whatever.
Oh,
like
you might have just like wrecked him. Like, see you later.
Totally. And so that,
But he knew. Did he know?
I mean, I think it's one of those that he had it in the back of his mind, but he also never really wanted to confront it.
Because you were his buddy.
Totally. And so,
Well, I've never thought about it from his perspective.
No.
So if he knew, he
yeah,
didn't want to go there because it would have been too painful for him to like even create the option for you to abandon him.
totally. And I think when I found out later, my mom and my stepdad actually, or my mom and my real dad, not original dad, my mom and my real dad actually had the conversation about doing a paternity DNA test, and he didn't want to do it. I think because he was nervous if for some reason it ever came back that it wasn't, that would have just wrecked him. So he just didn't. He was like, nah,
because he
I'm
loved
good.
you.
Yeah. So he was like, I'm good. Like he didn't want to. I think he didn't want that small, slim chance that it came back and it went the other way.
Who wanted to do the test?
My mom asked once, like,
Was she maybe on the fence? Like she didn't know?
I think, well, yeah, I think it was always one of those sort of, it may be a little ambiguous and no one ever.
There was
like,
1 month of her life where she was.
There was one
like,
month where it was like, I'm not really sure.
Could have been.
And so, and then everything just sort of proceeded as. Now, what was great is that I didn't really get to have. I got to have the conversation with my real dad, stepdad, late in life, in my late 20s, early 30s.
Hugh, your real dad.
Yeah. And we got to sit down and talk about it once.
Wow.
And he just basically said, I don't know. He's like, I never really wanted to do the test. And we sort of left it at that. But internally, I think the way that we communicated, we both just kind of knew. And we we acknowledged it, but we never talked about it because he wasn't one to like, we're not going to sit and have long conversations about it. What's interesting is that my original dad had already passed away by the time. So from his life perspective, no one ever really discussed it. And he and I were buddies in our way.
So he just died knowing...
all the way to the end, which I actually appreciate that we never talked about it.
That's better.
And for him, he had a son until his late 20s, which I'm sure, as a dad, you appreciate that you even got that far.
Right.
Your son is out.
You were in some ways his lifeline. Like
right.
you gave him some sort of sense of meaning and purpose.
Yeah.
And you got to be that for him.
Yeah.
So I don't think you get enough credit. Well, like maybe you do. I don't think I would know, but I hope you realize like you're kind of the hero of this story. Like you as a child, you just kind of like went with it.
Right. Yeah.
When any normal adolescent would have, or very possibly would have been more like self-destructive about
whatever,
this, revolted, or like, but you loved all of your parents well. Like you were the meaning and purpose in Monty's life.
Right.
We'll just call him Monty because he's just a dude.
Right.
And you're also, you also just kind of allowed Hugh to deal with life the way he needed to deal with it.
Yep.
Hugh we could do a whole podcast talking about Hugh.
Yeah.
He was like this Renaissance man. He was my doctor, our family's doctor.
Yeah.
Like sometimes my dad
he flew planes with like NASA pilots and he had all these stories. He was very much that sort of, he was like a suburban Indiana Jones.
Right.
He kind of looked like Harrison Ford.
He was my dad's best friend for years. Yeah. He was my dad's best friend and also the guy who put his fingers up my dad's butt once a year. And I would always ask my dad, like, is that weird? Like,
Right.
And my dad had the funniest comment. What did he say? He said he would always tell Hugh.
That was for an exam, by the way. I don't
It
think
was
you
for an
could just
exam.
make
yes.
sure it was in context.
He was our primary physician.
Yes.
So when he would
Yes.
do the prostate
Yes.
exam.
There were technical
Yes.
and medical reasons for that.
Oh yeah, my dad always just said. I asked my dad about it. He said I would always just ask Hugh to make sure he clipped his fingernails.
Talk about that is
that's
some
weird,
close relationship.
Because I've had that done, but it's with a guy I only see once a year.
Yeah, totally. Not somebody you play racquetball with every morning.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed. That's funny.
He was just like, but you, in so many ways, I think of you as the stabilizing force in your family. A very complicated situation.
Right.
You had a complicated brother. You had a complicated parent situation. You were the stabilizer.
Yeah. It's interesting, and then coming full circle, I think what I've dealt with over the past year or so is all those people are gone. So
That's the other. All of them.
all of them are gone. Yeah. So my mom and both dads and my brother and my grandparents are all gone. So it's an interesting thing in your mid 40s then to sort of, you know, my nuclear family, my wife and my two boys are now the nucleus. And I had such a close relationship with my mom. I think especially growing up, just me and her, it was one of those that we just really got each other just in terms of.
And that relationship was based on truth.
Yeah. It was based on
100%.
truth.
This is my real mom. No one's saying I have another mom.
No.
This is my mom.
Yeah.
And you knew that.
Right. And so, yeah. So it's been interesting over the past year just analyzing that, going through some of that reconciliation mentally about sort of the foundational structures of where you come from, and then also have all of those sort of ties and tethers to who you are gone. So, yeah.
I can't imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, it's obviously healthy to be focused most on your nuclear family, but you're having no choice.
Right. Yeah, it's different. I would say over this past year so lost mom a year ago, and then granddad three weeks after that. And then, yeah, it's been an interesting sort of very reflective
So I'm
period.
gonna take a risk and be a little vulnerable here, and I'm gonna tell you something that I maybe you realize this, but we have conversations all the time. We started a company together.
Yeah.
We're trying to figure out how to leverage new technology to, AI, automation. We're building apps. This episode is sponsored by Word Salad. It's an amazing AI app. You just talk into your phone about whatever you want while you're in the car, and when you get back to your desk, it's going to be a perfectly formatted note with other links to related topics. And if you're a writer, if you're leading meetings, building presentations, if you're an author, if you give speeches, it's a way to just get all those thoughts out in whatever order you need to, and then have them perfectly formatted however you need inside of your Notion or whatever. That's our sponsor.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Turn half-baked ideas into actionable plans.
Oh, I love it. Oh, that was much better. So we have conversations all the time about like, what are we even doing? Like as an entrepreneur
Yeah.
in this day and age, as who's also a father, like you don't have whatever hours most entrepreneurs in their 20s had to just like dive in.
Yeah.
You're spreading your energy. It's not just
Right.
time, it's energy. It's your vibrations.
Yeah. Exactly.
You're spreading your energy. You're an entrepreneur, but you're also delving into new territory because that's who you are. That's who you were in high school. Everyone else was learning social studies, and you're over here tinkering with like modems and
Yeah.
That's who you are. You're always going into new territory. You're also navigating. It sounds like as you look back on the last 30 years of your family life, like what just happened?
Totally.
Where did everybody go? You've been through multiple types of trauma. You lost a brother at an unfortunate age in an unfortunate way. We've talked about all these things, and I'm sitting here going, give yourself some credit, man.
Yeah.
Look at your life. You've got, I was just downstairs in your like cute house in this like perfectly quaint suburb that most of the world would work their whole life to have and never get it. You've got two kids who like you've got one kid down there scraping carrots. He's making soup with your wife to give to the guy who's having a baby next door.
The woman.
The woman.
With the husband.
Yeah, you don't know these
The guy's
days.
not. The guy.
I shouldn't have assumed either. I know it's Gary, but like that, how rude of me to assume it was a man. It's a woman named Gary.
Yeah.
You've got like your wife is on the way to a doctor's appointment to like you're having your son like evaluated for his learning style because you're wanting to make sure he's learning in all the right ways.
Cut from the same cloth.
Like, what are you?
Yeah.
You did it. Just don't minimize what I'm saying. Don't talk to that. You need to give yourself some credit.
Yeah. No.
You have done what no one else in your family did.
Yeah. Agreed.
You've got stable, like you're living the dream.
Yep.
And I'm just telling you this in public for some reason. I'm telling you that like you're doing okay.
Yeah.
Like all these attempts to like get centered and figure it out. Like there is no plan. Like of course you don't know what the next 6 months hold because that's not who you are.
Right.
You're not an accountant. You're not a physician.
No.
You're a trailblazer. And since you were in high school, you've been figuring out how to be a trail. It's all adding up, and you just should be okay with how great you're doing.
Yep. It is.
I hope you can see that.
I can. It is hard from time to time to just sit in that.
Yeah, I can tell.
Yeah.
Because we're always talking about the next way to like
Totally
trick our brain into being happy, and like therapy, and that's great.
Yeah.
You do part of it's because you are open to therapy,
Right.
but the trick is realizing, and this is so easy for me to say, I am loving preaching to the choir right now.
Right.
I'm loving this.
Yeah.
But the trick is realizing that like you're not working towards something. You're here. You did it. Like all things considered.
Right.
You fucking did it.